Hi, I'm Michael Spelling. I'd like to talk to you about, very quickly, about a quarter of a century of research in psychiatric disorders, defining how you can do phenotypical screening on the critical brain circuits which are involved in cognition and in emotion, and which have a unique switch, being able to switch between plasticity or negative plasticity. And we believe, and a large number of us now in neuroscience believe, this is a critical circuit, and I had the good chance to start working on it 30 years ago. Let's share the screen. So this is phenotypical screening on key brain circuits for psychiatric disorders. And now DSM-5, the diagnostic manual, is in some disrepute. Andrew Scull has written a book about desperate remedies, which is really a major attack on psychiatry aspects. And Tom Insel, the ex-director of NIH, considers, although he produced some great papers, he may have wasted $20 billion in mental health. However, the new director of National Institute of Mental Health, who I know well, Josh Gordon, is very interested in circuit-based research and considers the hippocampal prefrontal input. This link between hippocampus and prefrontal cortex is absolutely critical for many aspects of cognition. So very briefly cover the genetic aspects, but very briefly. I'm going to show that this circuit is actually critical, and it's something that we started working on 30 years ago. And really an exciting story with a lot of input. So 30 years ago, I was recruited by Servier to set up their brand new neuroscience research center, this lovely center. And effectively, I started off as a cardiovascular pharmacologist, worked my way up to stroke in Syntex. And then I was very interested in psychiatric disorders and neurodegeneration. And I was actually managed the job of setting this research center up and starting it off. And there I met Daniel Mold, who was in charge of much of Sergei's marketing, and was very also interested in psychiatric disorders, and had a great relationship with a key neuroscientist, Bruce McEwen, the man who showed how dendritic arborization in the hippocampus could be blocked by stress. And I'd also worked on some of these stress models at Syntex, and he helped me link up with a whole pile of a whole lot of psychiatrists in France, and also with Bruce, who was in contact with. And there I met Therese J, who was the very first person to define the hippocampal to prefrontal cortex. And we started off a brilliant collaboration, and that's been 15 papers. And subsequently, I also was moved to take on a research center in Hungary, which is also working on psychiatric disorders. I'll show you what we did there very quickly, and also set up a chemistry center in Hungary as well. Now, the way it was successful because we had some really excellent people to collaborate with in all sorts of areas: AMPA receptors, amygdala, phosphoproteins, mitochondria in some of them, Jerry Lambert in Dundee on GABA, Claude Sebon on EEG, Bruce McEwen, and really quite remarkable people. And also Pierre Gressen's a great friend. I've only got 12 papers with Pierre, 15 with Therese. So it really was a great collaboration. And the thing was, when we started off, one of the key things I wanted to see was which were the key brain areas which were affected. Because in a heart, you can see from a single neuron with twitching what you're going to get out of the heart. Single neuron twitching, if you don't know what it's going to do. There's a key cognition area between hippocampus and frontal cortex, which is critical for laying down memory and for also temporal and spatial context. And this is also dysfunctional. It's also crucial for extinction memory, but it's also dysfunction in depression and schizophrenia. So this gives us a new way in, possibly, to looking at these psychiatric disorders. And effectively, working with Therese from 2000, we were able to show that the hippocampus to the prefrontal cortex is critically affected by stress, and that the neuroplasticity is blocked by stress. And also, this is really important, the amygdala, the emotional area, is accelerated. This plasticity is increased by stress. And so this gives you a different way of looking at the effects of declarative memory versus emotional memory into the cortex. And since we were able to put this into a Nature Drug Discovery paper, which actually changed the direction of a few other pharmaceutical companies, and we had subsequently another 3 major Nature Drug Discovery papers. It's, as I'll show you, it's really quite accepted now. So the story is that we could believe that the hippocampus to the medial frontal cortex is key for laying down the spatial and temporal aspects, which are the maps held in the hippocampus, and this directs the medial frontal cortex. And the amygdala, with the behavioral output to emotion, is then under control of the medial frontal cortex and links with across the head to the amygdala, to the hippocampus. We've got a paper showing that it's the weak link in psychiatric disorders, because this can be blocked easily by stress. And this is evolutionarily important, because if you've got a rat which is crossing a yard and it sees a cat, it doesn't want to be thinking, where have I seen that cat before? No, it shuts down the contextual aspect within 100 milliseconds and activates the fear, flight, and ratio. But the problem is, in humans, we're much more complex than that, and it's going on all the time. And our stress can actually modify that, and it's a really important area. And so this is our way in which we believe that this is important to PTSD, depression, and schizophrenia. It's glucocorticoids which drive it. And the biggest psychiatric consortium in the world, 25 million euros, with 8 pharma and multiple academic groups, have confirmed that this is a critical pathway. So what happens within the hippocampus is a risk for stress. The amygdala, however, then has a very complicated series of outputs for all of the fear, flight, and rage, etc. And the periaquedural gray is a critical one, which actually is can produce rage, and but also that's high frequency stimulation will produce rage. Low frequency stimulation will allow cats to purr, and defensive flight, etc. So they're very important circuits. However, this complexity is such that it's actually very difficult to modify the neuroplasticity coming out of the amygdala in a specific way, and it also grows up differently in different people. So this is a variable which I believe will never be able to properly control. But the overall switch is something which is the granularity which you can hit with drugs, and also behavior. So, and by behavior, look at this. This was something we produced now a few years ago. It's now far worse. By age of 18, 14,000 hours of education for Americans, 16,000 hours of television and computer games, 200,000 acts of violence. And what I'll show you in a minute is that 30 minutes of stress can change neuronal plasticity. So what happens in all these 16,000 hours in a developing brain? And that was an article. This was the way in which we actually got another Nature Drug Discovery with the output of IMI neonates. So I'm a simple pharmacologist. So with Therese, we added her circuit, the output of the hippocampus to the frontal cortex, the same brain areas which are an approximation of the ones which you can see in humans are affected in depression and schizophrenia. And a simple 30-minute platform will stress the rat. You can then, it freezes, you've got to freeze. And then you can anesthetize it on the platform and compare with control rats, which just taken the cage. There's an enormous increase in corticosterone, and LTP is complete. This is the control, the LTP in the control rats, LTP in the stressed rats is completely blocked. Long-term potentiation, the marker of neuronal plasticity, 2004. And interestingly, LTP in the amygdala is increased. So we've got a switch. If you do it chronically, every day for a month, and without anesthetizing and implanting electrodes, the implanted electrodes after the month, same effect. So it's reproducible. At the same time, you've got inhibition of working memory, and also now you get changes in medial frontal cortex volume, and you also have many changes in dendritic alveolization. We've worked out all the mechanisms for it. It's brain-derived neurotrophic factor driven, a classic neurotrophic pathway, and it's blocked by corticosterone blockers, mifepristone. The BDNF pathway goes by TrkB, MEK kinase, and then into the classic plasticity pathways, but also BDNF was shown with the aggressins and Markham will increase the efficiency of brain mitochondria, respiratory coupling index, and that's via the MEK kinase pathway, but then going into BCL2 and VDAC to change brain mitochondria. So you've got an increased efficiency of mitochondria with BDNF, which is then blocked by stress and also by inflammation. So it's really important. And the IMI new meds as the lasting legacy was that the role of the hippocampal frontal cortex is critical, and we worked out the very different aspects on the pharmacology, because it's a different pharmacology to get into this. Now, we also were able to show it was imaging and the pharmacology for interest, and interestingly, ketamine increases connectivity in HPFC, which might well be an interest for its psychedelic effects. Copy number variants are also robustly implicated in schizophrenia. And this is work from Rees et al., but also in IMI new medicine spent an enormous amount of time making the animal models of these copy models of these copy number variants, which are all, and this the odds ratio, the increase in odds ratio of schizophrenia with these copy number variants. And you can see it's almost infinity with 22q11, which is the DeGeorge syndrome. And 2.5% of schizophrenia patients carry a copy number variant at one of these implicated loci, and many of them are DeGeorge. And we've made the animals, and the thing is that the same issues of copy number variants, which change neuronal plasticity, have also very big effects on these circuits. So a copy number variant is 1 in 4,000 live births. We've got a big group of patients in Paris. The disorder is also known as George or velocardiofacial syndrome. It's associated also with an IQ deficit. IMI new meds made, first of all, we looked at copy number variants in the Icelandic population with decode. We found that the copy number variants could actually change brain structure, even in people that weren't schizophrenic. So the brain structure can be changed by copy number variants. And the hyperconnectivity was seen quite clearly in 22q. And the overall, we have made the animal models, I won't go into this. The overall conclusion is mutations affecting neural plasticity have a gene-dose relationship on the odds ratio of developing schizophrenia, which should also be highly dependent on environment, stress, and puberty. So there you've got, and so we actually put this through the stress model now in mice of the 22q microdeletion syndrome, and it disrupts pre-pulse inhibition, disrupts a gambling task. And here's the LTP in the control animals. Control LTP in the 22q animals is less already, and they're all blocked by stress. Stress would also be important for 22q patients. And you could reverse this with the antipsychotic clozapine, which is by far the best drug to give to 22q patients. So we actually wanted to make a better clozapine, and we did by phenotypical screening on this pathway. So we looked for theta bursts, which actually is the way in which the memory can be laid down, and we got this drug 11150, which will increase theta band in the power spectrum at 30-fold lower doses than clozapine, 100-fold lower than the other antipsychotics. And what is more, it would actually increase theta in the locus, in the zone of lacunosum of the hippocampus directly, non-cholinergic theta. And we could also reverse stress completely with the ASLM 150, which clozapine would only reverse it partially. It was pro-cognitive, and it allowed animals which had been given phencyclidine or ketamine to restore its social behavior. Really big effect. The LTP is obviously blocked by stress, and it's completely reversed by this compound. And it also increased coherence of EEG, even in the presence of PCP or ketamine. So a really major effect. Unfortunately, we never worked out fully why it was doing it, because we'd chosen a phenotypical model, but we couldn't get rid of the alpha-1 affinity. And that caused some postural hypertension in volunteers, which is, unfortunately for Servier, they didn't realize what an important compound this was 20 years ago and stopped it. I had major numbers of really top-level psychiatrists who flew in to say we should not stop it, but that was the decision. I'm afraid decisions sometimes don't get reversed. And if we'd gone straight into schizophrenics in phase 1, I'm sure we'd be able to get it through. If I'm convinced there's also an alpha-1 deficit in schizophrenia, and prazosin is a crucial aspect for changing brain metabolism in the cortex. So, so this shows we've got a key brain switch, which is crucially important in development, which can be modified pharmacologically, and which now I would like to just say some of the major players in this game. Bruce McEwen, who unfortunately passed away, was a guiding light right at the very start with his stress, and we were able to develop his stress project out of the hippocampus, also from the cortex. So due to Therese. He's had 15 papers with her. It's a delight to work with her. Shona Chatterjee has just been in Bangalore with a research center. He's got a new research center to explore this, particularly in Calcutta. Josh Gordon is the director of National Institute of Mental Health, who's also convinced about the hippocampus frontal cortex. And I spent a day with him in Paris because Macron was announcing 2 weeks ago an 80 million euro initiative for mental health, and a new research center was then given to set up to be my friend Pierre Gressens, who I've only, as I said, I've only got 12 papers with him, and I'm going to be attached to this, so my retirement, which is now the Spelling Research Solutions lasted 10 years, will obviously be put off a bit further. But I want to point out that we're very welcome for collaborations, and we're looking forward to being able to continue this research, which I believe is crucial, not only for that, but for entire societies, because poor African boy soldiers are going to develop their brain in a very different way from us in civilized situations. And the switches and the growth of neuronal connections between context and emotion is a critical switch for not only for human beings, but also for human societies. So thank you very much. And I'm willing to take any questions throughout the meeting.